We welcome you to another edition of Being Well Informed. My name is Claudia Barber, and I am your host on this fine day. We are excited to discuss on this podcast the important topic of police reform, the new conversation. And I have with me as my very fine guest, Dwayne Bryant. Welcome to Being Well Informed.
Good morning. Good morning. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you, Claudia.
It is a great pleasure to have you because you have been in this field of the whole police reform for a while now. Tell us about yourself, Dwayne Bryant.
Sure. I'm the president and founder of Intervision International. The way I got into police reform, because the last 20 plus years, my work has been with young people. My company, we develop social emotional learning curriculum, teaching young people goal setting, time management, conflict resolution, bullying, study skills, etc. Really getting them prepared for life. We've discovered that if you can impact a child's self-esteem, their self-awareness, it will make them want to do better academically, as well as connect their present with their future. And the way I got into the whole police space, one day I was doing a workshop with fourth, fifth, and sixth graders on the south side of Chicago. I asked a simple question. Hey, if you're on a playground playing, minding your own business and doing nothing wrong, if the police car drove over, what would you do? And these babies said, run. I said, wait a minute, why would you run? They said, because I don't want to get shot, I don't want to get harassed, and I don't want the police to stop us from going home. But what's interesting, yeah, right? But here's what's interesting. Two of the bigger boys said, well, I wouldn't run, but if they disrespect me, I'm going to disrespect them. And I'm like, oh no, this is not going to end well for these young people. And so that's when I was like, okay, we need another voice. We need a new conversation with the young people, with the police, because this is not going to be good for the nation. It's not going to be good for our community, and it's not going to be good for the police.
Well, you know, there are so many communities. You spoke of Chicago, but on the East Coast, we just had a killing in Fairfax County, in which the video was released by Fairfax County Police, and it resulted in the termination of the officer from the police force after the video was released. So that tends to be, and that was actually a flight situation too. So why is it that young people run when they see the police?
Right. Okay. So I'm going to literally yesterday I was in Memphis. I'm working with some schools in Shelby County schools. And this particular school, these young people are incarcerated. So they've already had not so pleasant encounters with law enforcement, but they've also engaged in criminal activity. So let's tell the whole story. One boy said, Mr. Bryant, whenever I see the police, I just run. I'm like, what? He said, I could be in my mama's car. I would jump out of the car and run. I'm like, what? So that may be an extreme. But I think the other piece is trauma, fear. When we talk about the neuroscience of fear, the amygdala hijack, the prefrontal cortex is not engaged. So you're just basically working on pure emotion. And when you're afraid, you're either ready to fight, you flight, you run, or some people even freeze. So I think a lot of people, not just children, but grownups as well, if they get into their fear factor, they begin to run, which is a trauma response. And here's what's interesting. When I was in Seattle, I was doing some work with the police department there. And one of the officers said, you know what, Mr. Bryant, thank you for this workshop, because I see the error of some of my ways. I said, what do you mean? He said, when I was a younger officer, I would see some black guys and I'd walk behind them, just walk behind them for a little while. And I'll say, hey, what about that warrant? And he said, the one who ran is the one I chased. And I look forward to chasing them, getting them on the ground, handcuffing them. I said, why? He said, because why would they run if they didn't have a warrant? I said, what? I said, maybe because they're traumatized, maybe because they're afraid that you're walking behind them. They don't know what's going on. I said, what happens when they don't have a warrant? They still get arrested because you profiled them. You use implicit, explicit bias. And this is just wrong on all fronts. So sometimes they run because it's a legitimate reason, because of officers like that. Sometimes they run because of fear, and sometimes they run because they're a criminal and they're trying to get away. So you have three responses there.
Wow, that's enlightening. But there tends to be this frequency to run.
Yeah,
So then there's this whole concept you're mentioning, the new conversation. What is the new conversation?
sure. So the old conversation is, why didn't they comply? Or the police was racist, or my child has never done anything wrong, or whatever the old conversation is. The new conversation is about mutual respect, shared responsibility, and accountability. And I sometimes get in trouble from both sides because I'm like, I'm not taking sides. I am anti-criminal. If that criminal's in the community wearing a hoodie, or if that criminal's on law enforcement wearing a badge, criminals need to be arrested, period. And I'm not taking sides. So the new conversation is about full accountability. We say things such as a few bad apples. That is the biggest lie that's ever been told. For instance, let me share some stats with you really quickly. There's over 40 some thousand police officers have lost their certification, over 5,000 for drugs and alcohol. So here it is, you're on the law enforcement, you're in the police department, and you have drugs and alcohol in your system. So what happens when you're afraid, when you see the black guy or the black guys in the car, you got drugs and alcohol in your system. We don't check you, we check their system. So we need to be checking everybody's blood alcohol level. So therefore, over 5,000 have been disbarred because of drugs and alcohol. Assault and violence, over 3,500. Dishonesty, theft, misconduct with prisoners, sexual misconduct, official misconduct. So we have officers around the country, some of which should not even be on the police department to start with. Mm-hmm. Those officers are probably going to be the ones causing problems. In maybe 2014, the FBI stated many neo-Nazis and white supremacists have infiltrated or joined law enforcement across the country. So if we have white supremacists who have a gun and a badge, what do we think the outcome of that police encounter is going to be with my educated, non-criminal black self on the street at night, and it's just me and the officer? It probably won't be a good outcome. So the new conversation is pure truth. Let's tell the truth. Let's look at the history of policing in America. Where did it start from? Slave catchers, et cetera. And then let's be accountable. Also, the new conversation is about police misconduct is costing American taxpayers billions of dollars every year. Now, we know some communities don't care when black and brown people get killed, but we know those same communities care when their pocketbooks are affected.
You're right, because oftentimes when you hear about a multi-million-dollar settlement in a police brutality case, that is usually taxpayer dollars being used
Absolutely.
to fund that, especially if municipalities are self-insured and they're not, if they don't have any other type of specific insurance to cover that. And oftentimes we don't see the officer, for example, necessarily losing a pension behind this. And that becomes an issue for many jurisdictions. And I know the state legislature in Maryland is taking up for the first time this concept of removing the pension of officers that are convicted of a specific police brutality incident.
That is absolutely important, because here's the reality. Some states, I believe Colorado, has eliminated qualified immunity. Police officers get to kill you lawfully and sometimes serve no criminal charges, have no civil penalties. So then the question is, so why not kill somebody? Why not give the benefit of the doubt? Why not de-escalate? Because if there's no consequences, it's like the bully in the classroom. If the teacher just says, hey, sit down, stop that, be quiet, but there are no consequences, what does the bully do? He or she continues to bully. So there has to be punitive, civil, criminal, as well as financial consequences for law enforcement who illegally. There are certain things called shooting lawfully. There are a time when police officers have the legal right to take your life, and they do it lawfully. We're not talking about those professional officers. We're talking about the ones who dehumanize people, who intentionally go out to provoke situations, and those officers are creating the problems.
How can people of color survive a police stop?
There are several ways people of color can survive a police stop. First of all, uh, when I got stopped in Indiana in 2015, the police told me I was doing 20 miles per hour over the speed limit. Here's what's interesting. The speed limit was 70. I did not know it dropped to 60. But I said, if I do about 80, 82, 12 miles per hour over speed, they're not going to stop me. I didn't realize I was doing 22 miles per hour over the speed limit. Indiana, when Trooper Weller stopped me, he said, listen, I can have two options. I can take you to jail because you're doing 20 miles per hour over the speed limit. It's considered reckless driving, or I can give you a $500 ticket. Yeah, I said, yeah. So here's the one thing: we don't know the law. There are over 100 pages of vehicular violations. Most encounters with law enforcement is some kind of vehicular violation. If you don't turn your signal light on when you're changing lanes, that's a vehicular violation. If you don't stop fully at a stop sign, there's so many different things that if a police officer just follows you, he can find a reason to stop you. So the first thing I would say is, one, find out what is the law, what are your rights, what is the First Amendment right, what is the Second Amendment, what is the Fourth Amendment. Most police officers violate the Fourth Amendment rights of people, and they don't even know what their rights are. So the first thing I would say, people of color need to get educated. Don't get educated so you can hold court on the street. I know my constitutional. No, that's too much. That's too far. The second thing is take responsibility. I was speeding. I was doing 20 miles per hour over the speed limit. I didn't tell the officer, you stopping me because I'm black, you a racist. No, how about, wow, I didn't know, officer, I was going 20 miles per hour over the speed limit. I don't like these two consequences. Is there something else we can
Right.
discuss? Right. And so, because I was going to a speaking engagement, what if I would have gotten arrested that day? I would have missed my speaking engagement in Battle Creek.
Exactly.
I would have had a criminal record. To this date, I'm 52. I've never been arrested, never had handcuffs put on me, no criminal history at all. So the things I'm talking, I think I've lived it well enough to be able to share this information. So know your rights, know the law. Secondly, take responsibility. If you are in violation, then one, understand your power. So when the police officer stopped me, he brought back $150 ticket. I said, hey, officer, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Can I take a picture of you? He said, why would you do that? I said, because I have students who believe if a black man have an encounter with a white police officer, it's going to be a fatality. And I want to show them that you're not the only one with power in the stop. I have power too. He said, wait, you have power? I said, absolutely. He said, what is your power? I said, my word choices, my body language, and my tone. I use all of those things in my advantage for my power so that this can be an easy stop. He said, give me that ticket back. And I was like, oh man, he gonna tear this ticket up and shoot me for real now because I done talked too much. However, most times you have power. If you do have that white supremacist officer, the one who's looking to harm you, then your power may very well be limited, but you still have power because our ancestors knew, boom, we give a quick prayer up and the Holy Spirit can arrest that whole situation. So we still have power no matter which officer come to the scene. But what happens is when we operate in fear, we give up all of that power because our emotions take over, our mental capacity diminish, our spiritual capacity diminish, and therefore we're only there in the flesh. Flesh is not what's going to win this battle for us in this nation.
Excellent points. I mean, excellent points. The importance of mentoring. How important is that?
Mentoring has been my lifeblood. When I graduated college, I went to college on a full academic scholarship, graduated finance international business, worked for Johnson & Johnson in sales, started in Miami, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, then got promoted here to Chicago. What I've discovered is our young people do not see us. They don't see intelligent men and women. And I'm not saying all, but I'm saying enough of them that it is a problem. They don't see young men, older men and women who are willing to come in and share with them, to talk with them, to spend time with them, to give them curriculum advanced lessons to help them navigate this thing called life. So mentoring, to me, we've literally helped schools and school districts increase test scores 35% in a 5-year period of time, decrease suspension 70% over a 5-year period of time. We've helped schools and districts eliminate expulsions where kids were fighting, but once we go in and they see us consistently, people who look like them, talk like them, grew up like them, but we have a better way. We've been exposing students with field trips, bringing in career days, just opening their minds to the unlimited possibilities. Right now, in most inner cities in America, you ask a child, what do you want to do? I want to be a football player. I want to be a basketball player. I want to be a rapper or some kind of reality television star. When we took kids, when Oprah Winfrey was here in Chicago, we took them on a visit to her studio. They saw her grips, people making $80,000 a year just pulling cables. They talked to her cameramen. They talked to her editors. They talked to her producers. They talked to her graphic designers. They talked to her pilot. They talked to everyone but her. Oprah was not there for us to talk to. However, they were like, wait a minute, all these people are employed. Yeah, everybody want to be Oprah Winfrey, but she's employing tens of millions of dollars worth of employment ability with individuals. So everyone is not going to go to college, fine, but jail should not be an option either. So mentoring simply exposes people to unlimited possibilities. And I love what Jane Elliott said. She said, we have to be educators. Educators are people who lead people out of ignorance. Right now, our young people are ignorant because they don't know. It's not that they're dumb, they're just ignorant. So what we have to do is shine a light on this ignorance and expose them. And once their minds are open to new things, they will advance to the levels that they should be on.
Well, you don't know what you don't know. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's all of us.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And to that extent, we I appreciate how you shared the whole concept of the fact that we do have power, even at a
Absolutely.
police stop. And then the whole concept of repairing cop and community relations. How do you respond to that?
So repairing police and community relations is crucial. But you have people on both sides who don't want to repair these relations. You have
Mm,
officers who is it's us against them. These are thugs. These are criminals. We gotta lock them up. You got these folk over here saying, F the police. We don't give a fried chicken about the police, defund the police, or whatever it may be. So these are two extremes. But the majority of us, the 80 something percent of us, are right here in the middle who understands, hey, if we don't get a grip on this, this thing is not going to be bad because one George Floyd created protests in 60 countries around the nation. Black people didn't even know people cared about us around the world because we've been in this country thinking that we're just a bunch of whatever this country has told us we were and no one cares. It's not true. George Floyd cost Minneapolis $27 million. That was just in the lawsuit, but it also cost Minneapolis hundreds of millions of dollars when police departments were being burned down, when looting was taking place, when the city was being torn up. So the reality is no city in America can afford the cost of what happened in Minneapolis. But why was that? You had 5 pathetic police officers who lacked leadership, who had no regard for human life. And it may have been 4. I'm thinking Tennessee. It may have just been 4. One stood on his neck. 2 or 3 of them held them, and one just watched out for them. That's a problem. So we need police officers to have courage and leadership. We need better training, but you can't train a racist heart. So we also need accountability. We need to be able to screen these officers before they get on the force to understand, have I looked at their social media? Do they have swastika tattoos? And some of these officers do. Do they have any kind of communication with the Black community or the brown community and the communities in which they serve? If not, then that is a leadership problem within the chief or the police department, because those officers are not qualified to work in these communities, especially if I think little of them. The other piece is we got to have community responsibility. Community also, when we talk about the blue wall of silence, but we have a no snitch code. We know Pookie shot that person. We know Pookie running drugs out of this house. We know the dope dealers. We know the gang bangers. But what do? we cover our criminals. So just like we don't want the police department to cover their criminals, we got to stop covering for our criminals as well. Because when we cover for criminals, who wins are the criminals. So it's so many different solutions. None of it is rocket science. It's all about, do we have the will to improve our neighborhoods and communities? Do we understand that we need law enforcement? Because whenever something happens, most people, who do you call? The police department. You don't call cousin, you don't call Ronnie and Rank Wank and all them people. They ain't coming over. And if they do come over, it may be a bigger problem. So this is about common sense solutions. This is about holding everyone responsible and accountable. And what happens though is, let me share this. When I'm in Memphis, I realize why this probably won't happen. There's billions of dollars being made on the backs of Black and brown boys mostly, and girls being locked up. When I go into the prison system there, I look around. I ask the boys, how many millions of dollars are you creating? How many jobs are you creating? They're like, what you're saying? I said, in order for me to get to you, I had to get locked down 10 halls. Every hallway had a guard with a gun. Every guard had on a uniform. Every guard had on a belt. Every guard had ammunition on that belt. Every guard had a firearm. There's paint on every wall. There's electricity running through here. There's toilets where you go sleep. There's cots. You guys are wearing uniforms. These are little Croc shoes you got on. This is $1 billion industry. People are getting paid on the backs of our young people being locked up. Whether it was in 74 with Nixon, war against drugs, 84, Ronald Reagan doubled down, 90s with Bill Clinton. This whole system has been designed to incarcerate Black men to get them out of the home, which has had a devastating impact on our community. So we have to be mindful of, what am I doing to feed into this system? And these young boys, they're carjacking, they're selling drugs, and they all say, I'm not going to get caught. Evidence shows you probably will. So we have to have better parenting. Let's not forget about the parents who, some of these boys say they bringing money home to take care of their mom. Their mom know they're out there in the street selling drugs, but they're like, hey, you know what? You got to do what you got to do. So there's responsibility to go around in every aspect of police community relations, not just the police.
Why policymakers need to focus on education?
Policymakers, well, here's the deal. America's getting ready to eat its lunch, get its lunch served to them. Because when we look at countries like China and their academic prowess, when we look at countries like China partnering with Russia, who also are friends with Iran, who's also friends with North Korea, and who's also building Belt and Road initiatives across the world, America is asleep. And American population is pretty dumb when you think about it. We're more interested in TikTok and Snapchatting, Instagramming, and all this ignorant stuff, and we're not focusing on academics. So policy changes is important because we got to start raising the academic standard. We have to start raising standards for schools, for what we're producing in the households and things of that nature. And some of that stuff is policy, but some of that you can't legislate. You can't legislate a parent being a responsible parent, making sure their children are prepared academically, but not just academically, socially as well. However, policymakers can take away qualified immunity. If I know I may be held liable for killing this person unlawfully, I might think 2 or 3 times about that. If I'm a parent and your child is found with a gun and your child is doing illegal things and you're held responsible, you're the one who has to pay for that child, you're the one who goes to jail, then guess what? I might think a little bit hard about letting Pookie and Trey out at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, doing whatever they want to do to bring monies home. So policymakers do have a big power in dictating actions and consequences.
One of the things we're scrolling at the bottom of our screen today is www.dwayneBryant.com, spelled DWayneBryant.com. If we go to that website, what can we find?
Oh, all kinds of goodies. So one, after COVID, you'll find my e-learning with DB link where I began to create online content. You'll also find the new conversation pre-recorded in video if you want the whole, I think it's a 14 video series in small bites, like 10, 15, maybe 17 minutes. You will also find the work that I've done in my staff and my team on professional development for teachers. The greatest power of educator workshop you'll find. We also have the impact of social media. Very important for parents to understand what's going on with their children. In 2018, NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, reported that 425,000 young people in America were reported missing. So we keep hearing and seeing signs about this person missing. Where are they going? How are they being lured? Social media is a huge factor in what's going on with our children. You'll also see some of my engagements on a college and university level, some of my engagements with the students. So that site will show you why you want to bring me or one of my team members to your school, to your university, to your corporation. It also shows you some of our demonstrated results. Also, there's a link to our YouTube channel if you want to see some of our videos and what we've done over the last 25, 26 years engaging young people. So there's a lot of goodies on DwayneBryant.com.
I love it. I am just thrilled at what you do and how you are proactively making a difference. I am so astounded and pleased by that. So how can the community also make more proactive decisions?
Sure. First of all, the community has to understand who are the leaders, right? We have a lot of leaders, but who's doing something? Are we talking, or are we effectively organizing, galvanizing ourselves together? And when I say organizing, when I was in Seattle, we had the municipality, we had the mayor's office, the police chief, the religious community, as well as local community and activists. Are these individuals getting together, talking, creating solutions? Because if I go to 10 different cities, there's 10 different solutions. There's no one magic bullet. There's no silver bullet that will work for every particular city. However, there's some common sense practices that will work in every city. So I would say, leaders, it's time to lead. If you're in the pulpit and you call yourself a leader and the only thing you're doing is collecting tithes on Sunday and giving a message on Sunday, then you're probably not as effective as you can be, and you're probably not as effective as your calling says you should be. If you're a leader and you're not leading, then what are you doing? So I would say we need to come together as a community, all different aspects of community, and figure out what's happening in my community. How do we solve these problems? And I guarantee you, none of it is rocket science. None of it is rocket science. It's just, do we have a will to be honest? Are we going to hold everybody accountable and not only look at the police? Because from my hands-on experience with law enforcement, police officers, good officers, don't like bad officers in their rank because they know it makes them look bad. And I tell them, I get it, because guess what? When I walk down the street and old Black women are afraid and crossing the street, it's not because of my Black self. I would never harm them, but it's my brothers who created harm. It's my brothers who've done things to rob them. And now they look at all of us the same way. I say, so we got some of the same problems, and the solution is the same for us intelligent folk to hold those accountable who's creating the havoc in the communities to make sure we lessen that or get rid of it altogether.
You have really raised some excellent points, and thinking of this whole concept of proactive. I know for many municipalities, they have human relations commissions, and people, the community in particular, you can have advocacy groups like the NAACP, or if there are other activist groups, to compel them to look closely at hiring practices of police officers,
Absolutely,
screening practices of police officers. So that's another way in which proaction can make a difference.
Correct.
And yes, ministers can be part of that process.
They have
can
to be.
attend them.
Correct.
They can attend the meetings. They can attend the Human Relations Commission's meetings and so on. So I thank you for illuminating us with all of these ideas. I appreciate you very, very much for being a part of this program today. Thank you again, Dwayne Bryant.
And thank you, Attorney Barber.
Oh, you're so welcome. Looking forward to having you again. Thank you.
All right. You have a great day.